I'm beginning to feel like Ed McMahon up here, introducing people and laughing, and then shutting up. Anyhow, this is James Dickey on my right here. We're going to continue on with what we were talking about, which was, seemed to have forgotten.
Well, as I was saying.
So I mentioned Alan Tate dying.
Yeah, that was a great blow to all the literary and intellectual community. He's a kind of an original witness of the modern movement in poetry in this country. He was a very close friend of Eliot, of Hart Crane, and was a very highly regarded, still is highly regarded poet, a literary critic, founder of movements, commentator on cultural and religious matters. If we have anybody that could lay claim to the title of complete man of letters in our time, it would have to be Alan Tate. And to lose somebody like him, it's just like losing one of the foundations of everything that one has, in my generation, has been taught to live by as far as his writing and his viewpoint of the world is concerned. It's just, of course, he was an old man. He's almost 80 years old, and he had done yeoman service in the cause of civilization for many, many years. And we can be thankful for that. After all, it's a very good thing that there is such a thing as writing. All this can be written down and can be preserved, and it is preserved, and we're very lucky to have it. But still, when the man himself goes, it's a shocking thing, and it takes an awful lot of assimilation. In fact, I don't think in some cases, and his is one of them, that people like myself or Robert Lowell, who was a very close friend of his, if he had lived, I'm sure that he, like I, really will never get over it. But we'll remember him. We can always learn from a man like him. And there's a lot of his writing, too. That's good.
We were talking about novelists also going into theater, into script writing and that sort of thing. Did Tate write for the theater at all?
No, I think he had less interest in that, Kurt, than almost anything else in the art. He had, in the arts, his main interest was poetry and the writing of it and writing about it, and literary and aesthetic theory concerning poetry, but he also had a very strong interest in prose fiction. And the novel, to my knowledge, I think he wrote very little on the theater, although if it had aroused and sustained his interest, he certainly would have, so I assume that he didn't have very much.
Something that's always puzzled me about poets is that they aren't more interested in the theater.
A lot of them are.
Yeah, but I would think they would want actors out there to say these lovely speeches.
Well, they themselves are actors in a certain sense, as novelists are too. Especially if you do the kind of thing that you did so well last night. You mount the platform, as you and I and Mark Twain and Dylan Thomas do sometimes. You know what a very close correlation there is between, say, giving a public reading and acting. I remember when I first began to give readings, I had no idea of what should constitute, at least for me, a platform manner, or what it used to be called such. And I read around some of Mark Twain's writings about how he acquired his. Not that I wanted to emulate Mark Twain, God forbid, but I was much impressed with a couple of paragraphs he had on the uses and misuses of the pause. The only thing I remember about it was that he did use the pause in some way, and that it was thereby usable by me in some way. But I don't know. I would not claim that I did it like Mark did.
Sam, where's the pause that Kurt fell asleep in front of the? Or was that?
Well, I didn't say it, but I heard all about it. That time, Kurt, is more. He's very obliging, and our publicity director in New York, Carol Duffy, said, "Would Kurt go on that Englishman, David Frost show?" And I said, "Well, I'll ask him." I said, "I never care one way or the other if Fourth is low on it." But so he said, "Sure, I'll do it," and he did. And I heard the next morning. I didn't see it because I usually don't stay up that late. He fell asleep in front of 20 million Americans.
But what happened was...
That's what happened. You fell asleep in 20 minutes.
But I started in the first chair. I was first man on, and then I kept moving, and finally I was way the hell over there under that ladder somewhere,
Yeah.
And then the guy at this end said something, and Frost asked me what the hell I thought about that, and the camera...
What do you think of free will, I think?
Yeah. I was way down the other end, and I was asleep.
I did 20 minutes of Johnny Carson one night and never once mentioned my book, that I was an author or anything. And
A lot of the time, they don't even know what you're doing on the show.
or care. Anyhow, they said, get that famous bellhop back on.
I like it. This person shall be nameless, but is one of the better-known lady commentators, and I was on the show once, and one of these huge hookups and so on. And I knew we hadn't said anything previous to getting on camera, and I didn't know exactly what to expect, and so I knew I was in for a hard time when her first statement to me was, "Now, Mr. Dickey, you've written a book." I said, "Uh-oh." She doesn't know what book. Yes, I have. Certainly, I have, and several of them, and some of them are books of poems. Oh. So on that went. Half an hour of agony. I'm sure for the public as well.
They read nothing ever, though. You know that? They read the
I
Dust
don't
Jacket.
think they can read.
Yeah, they read the Dust Jacket, if you're lucky.
And you know what lies they tell, because I make all of mine up myself. No, I wish they'd let me.
Question, yeah.
I'd like to ask Mr. Vonnegut, what have been your most satisfying works and why? Which of your books?
Well, I've been interested in when the different arts pay off. It's where where the person feels happiest about it, and the painter is happiest when he's painting, and really doesn't give a damn about hanging in a museum. And I don't know when the payoff. I guess the payoff for the musician is in the performance, and I was wondering when the payoff is for a writer. It's right now, as I handed in a book a week ago, and this is as elated as I will be, I suppose. This will go on for 10 days or something like that. What has given me the most satisfaction, finishing anything, is just writing the end, is the orgastic experience. By God, I did it. And
It's exactly the opposite with me. I like the beginning of it.
You do?
Yeah.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, when I get something down and I say, "Now, Jim, if you can bring this off, Shakespeare is going to be completely forgotten as soon as the first human eye
in South Carolina.
On what you've written. The first human eye falls on what you've written, Shakespeare will be forever obliterated."
Great.
As it turns out, though, the actual productions that I have been able to finish and only slightly dimmed him a bit. But I have that first flush of possibility.
Are you talking about Deliverance too now, or
not as much as
You're talking
some
about
of the
poetry, aren't you?
Yeah. No, I don't. I don't myself, or at least in my own work, hold the novel nearly in the esteem that I do poetry. It's just not as great an art.
Jim, do you reread your stuff? I mean, later, say several years later?
Yeah, sometimes I'll be looking through an anthology, and I think the best, to use Mr. Vonnegut's word, what is it, transport, ecstasy, or whatever, sense of fulfillment, I guess, when I'm just leafing idly through an anthology and I come on something that seems like it might be pretty good, and I'm just kind of half paying attention to it, maybe half drunk or something. Or some, just not paying attention. And I look at it and I think, Jesus, that ain't so bad. Who's this guy? If he had done this with it, it really would have been something else. And I turned back and it's something by me. That's the sense of fulfillment that I really do have because I'm not looking at it from any special angle of viewpoint that's indigenous to me. I mean, it's just something that I see that seems to me to be pretty good, and it's gratifying to me to know that sometime when I was a different person years ago that I wrote it.
Can you do that, Kurt? I can't do that.
I don't read myself.
I can't either.
I get a deep sense of embarrassment.
Same here. I get to it. I said,
Yeah, we all have that. Yeah.
I had all the time.
But the bundle of 6 books you get is a contractual thing. Is you get 6 freebies customarily when the book is published. And God, I don't want to open that package.
That's right.
Just overwhelmed with shame. And I've tried to understand that. And I think part of it is you told. Is there all kinds of family secrets that were never supposed to go outside the family? Lots of things.
Yeah.
And here you've gone into this business of just blabbing to everybody about this and that, the worst possible taste. You told.
Walter?
Well, that's what you're saying is it's kind of true, and that's you find truth is important in what you're doing, particularly since you're kind of like in Slaughterhouse-Five. It's not science fiction, but it has that element in it, that fantasy element in it, and how does the truth lay into all that?
Well, I do tell family truths. I actually do. Like my mother was crazy, which was something that nobody need know.
Would you need that element in there? I mean, does that tie it together?
Well, yeah, but it takes my relatives apart. There's a lot of them are still around, and it seems a boorish thing for me to do, and they assume I do it for money.
But you have to do it. I mean,
I think so. I think it's what it is to be, as long as you don't tell the truth about yourself.
That's where you draw the line. In the village of M, the fellow we shall call X.
This is all in the line of the sob question, Mr. Vonnegut, but I was reading in the Wall Street Journal about Cleveland, very posh Cleveland shopping center, and the tremendous business they were doing during Christmas and afterwards. And one of the big selling stores was the Kilgo Trout's Men clothing store. Yeah. I hope you get a royalty from it, but it did. You certainly have made yourself proud of it.
They asked permission to do that.
The nice accent she has.
Yeah. There's going to be a Rosewater's a restaurant in New York, too, down in Soho. So
I've seen people who looked as though they'd been to Kilgore Trout's clothing store, but I didn't think it was the same.
You're very nice about it. Well, when they opened the Ginger Man in New York, J.P. Donlevy was shocked and wanted to have his lawyers on them for having used the title of his book. He was really mad, yeah. But of course the title is, anybody can use it. It's not copyrighted.
It's an old title.
You can't.
Of the Gingerbread.
No, it's the Gingerbread Man. I think the Ginger Man was his own creation.
I don't understand copyrights ever.
The titles are not copyrighted. I think they're patented, but I don't think they're copyrighted.
How about 2 lines of a song? Can you take that some information right now I need right now? You can't take
that's
2
under
lines?
Copyright.
How about 1 line?
1 line you can.
You can't do 1 line?
Yeah, but you can't do
Ditto?
more than
Okay.
without asking permission.
Yeah, you're talking about titles. You can think about, how many novels and movies do you know different ones called The Long Night? I can think of at least 4 just like that.
My dad said when I was doing this Ruby Red book, I said, he's a musician, I said, how much music can you steal from the top? He said, you can take 2 bars, then you got to make a move. But you can do 1 line, you can't do 2. That is?
Yeah. The toughest of all are ASCAP, who charge huge amounts of money just to have 2 lines.
Yates got a lot in this book.
Yes, and we had to clear those.
You have to pay a lot for that?
Yeah, we do. We do have to, and yeah.
Well, and Happy Birthday 1 to June, a play of mine, we play Happy Birthday in the damn thing, and people singing, I forget what happens. This is copyrighted. This song has a composer. And this man makes as much as a composer of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So don't screw around with happy birthday to you, people.
DMI out there, huh? Oh. Yeah, Sharon.
I wanted to ask, you were saying earlier that when you work, that you write on page one over and over again, but like the most satisfaction comes at the end when you finish. But when you start out, do you have an idea just where you're going, or what? Do you have a certain plan in mind?
Well, I have a feeling that human tragedy is that we have a highly intelligent brain, which is almost completely cut off from us. There's a layer of fat between that and the part of the brain we have to do business with. And so I have to find out what my good part of my brain has on its mind, is what it wants to tell. And so I'll sit there and do sort of finger exercises to get the faint signal from it. And generally the smart part of me does have a good idea for a book. And so no, I trust my mind, which I think is what you would do to teaching anybody anyway. I think one of the things that's wrong with American education is people are taught to mistrust their minds, and I think they're really remarkable gadgets.
Your writing just seems, well, you do a lot of...
You need a microphone.
You do a lot of...
I still need the microphone.
Wait a second.
No, it doesn't flow. I've written very few books for a person who's been writing as long as I have, and my books are about the size of the Bobbsey twins, and each one takes about 3 years to do. So it doesn't flow, and it's the Borden does. Borden's done 22 books of very high quality.
This getting your imagination to flow, is this why you outlined Slaughterhouse-Five so many times, so many different ways?
Well, I wanted money, for one thing, and so I thought it was time to film my war stories. Everybody else had done his war story, and so I was thinking in terms of people who'd been in from here to eternity. There's Frank Sinatra and Burt Lancaster, people of that maturity, and so it took me a long time to realize what the war really did look like. In the United States infantry at the end, it was all children. And that had to be pointed out to me, that this war was not fought by Burt Lancaster and Frank Sinatra. The infantry was 17, 18, 19-year-old kids who looked like kids. So it took me that long to simply tell the truth about it. And that was liberating to realize what the thing really looked like.
Well, is this why the military seems to carry the brunt of your sarcasm in the books? I'm thinking like in the
Sirens of Titan.
Thank you. Where you had privates running the generals around, and the painted boots and slaughterhouse.
Well, I think the Army is a bizarre idea, and it so happened that I never had the experience of being in a good military unit. My military experience was to take part in the largest defeat of American arms in history, I believe, which was the Battle of the Bulge, where so all I've seen is defeat, and I was never well led and all that. And if I had been well led, I mean, I was just a private. If I had been well led, my books would have had a very different sort of tone, and lots of people were well led. I was in a fuck-up division. It was the 106th Division. It was a bag lunch division.
Sure.
I noticed, well, all of the books by you that I've read have lots of poetry in them. Are you seriously interested in writing
They
poetry?
have doggerel in them.
Well, it must indicate some fondness and yearning to be a poet.
I think what if you look at it, is they are all parodies, which is something very different, and is I would just get interested in some poem that's stuck in my mind, and it's a playful thing to change the meaning of the poem by just changing a few words, which it doesn't call for any great amount of poetic sensibility on my part. It's a form of punning or screwing around. There's one thing in this trait is the natural, and this happens quite often that an extraordinary story will float in, and it is just perfect, as every word has arrived just where it should. Every scene is beautifully shaped, and this is the only thing the person is ever going to write. As these people are brought to New York and signed up for future books, and that was all they had, was that one story, one book. Gone with the Wind was such a case, I guess.
Mr. Vonnegut has said he was fairly happy with the film treatment of Slaughterhouse-Five, and I just wondered how Mr. Dickey felt about the translation of Deliverance to the screen. I know you wrote the screenplay, but how did you feel about the casting, for example?
If you make films, you come up against very quickly a lot of contingencies that you didn't, as someone who had never made a feature before, you come up against a lot of things that you didn't really know were going to have to be reckoned with. Such as casting, this is one, such as the director, such as the location, and all the things that you have to be able to control in order to make a film. A lot of it depends on the availabilities and what standing the various actors that are being proposed for the roles in the film, what status they have with the studio. And whether they're available or not, whether their agents want them to do it or not, and so on. And all that has to be hashed out, and everybody's got to be at least tolerably well satisfied before you can start. As very much of an amateur in this field, it was not that I chose to be guided by the people who were making the movie, Warner Brothers and John Boorman, the director, and so on. But I had to be guided because my word as the author, or my experience as a filmmaker, were not really worth very much. Although I did do the screenplay, they were when the scenes actually became to be shot, it was really not in my hands as to how they were shot. It was up to the director, the cinematographer, and the actors, and the location, and so on. And so, physically, the film was not exactly as I had pictured it when I wrote the novel. But then again, how could it have been? The character Lewis, for example, that Burt played, Burt Reynolds, was not like I had envisioned him at all. The character in the novel is a good deal more intellectual than Burt proved to be on film, and with a good many mystiques and so on that he would endlessly explain to everybody that would listen to him, and so on. I rather liked that kind of person, and I made him that way more in the novel than he turned out to be in the film. But I think I probably can say with all truth that there can be but very few films made from a novel that were as close to the novel that the film was made from as that one was. In addition, the film gave a visual sweep to the topography, the riverscapes and that sort of thing that I thought was stunning. We had a wonderful cinematographer. He did, before he came to us, he'd done McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and he's now done The Deer Hunter. So see that if you want to see somebody who can really handle a wide-screen camera, Panavision camera. But we were very fortunate to have it. Yeah, I've seen it dozens of times. I've seen it backwards, forwards, upside down, seen it in bits and pieces, put together, edited various ways. But I would see it again, and I look forward to see it again, just if for nothing else but the way he handled those big screen shots of that river. I think that Sam Peckinpah was going to be the first director on the film, and I met with him in London, and we talked out the possibilities. And I remember something he said to me. He was not able to be on the film for some kind of contractual troubles that he had with Warner's. But I remember him saying to me just as we shook hands and left each other, he said, well, you and I are trying to do the same thing, really. You with your words as a poet, it was words on the page, and me with my pictures on the screen. And I said, you know, what are we trying to do that's so similar? He said, well, we're both trying to give them images that they can't forget. And I said, yes, sir, maybe we'll work together later on something else. I like that. I agree. That's it. That's what I'm trying to do, and you are too.
I spent an evening in L.A. about 4 years ago with David Huddleston, the fat guy who plays the character parts. And he said, you have a big fan out here. He says, his name is James Cagney. He wants to see you. I said, let's have him right now. So he came over and we sat down. We talked for about 4 hours. And all we did was tell stories. You know, I tell Southern stories. He'd do Jewish stories, Irish stories. We kept talking all night, three of us. Came time to leave, I said, I'm going back to Iowa, and I got to tell the students I spent an evening with Cagney. I can't tell them these damn jokes. Give me something to take back and tell the students. He said, okay, I'll tell you what to do. So he said, I'll tell you what to tell them how to act. He said, the way I act is this. I'm on time. I hit my marks. I shoot my cuffs. I look the camera in the eye, and I tell the truth. Isn't that neat? And that's the way he talks and the way he is and the way he performs in it. This matches right in there. What a question, Philip.
Well, there's one thing about movie companies are fools to buy books because they always buy the book one character short, who's the author. And this was taken care of slightly in Mr. Dickey's case.
Oh, yeah, the sheriff, yeah.
He was present. And
he leans on a car, doesn't he?
Embarrassing.
He can lean on a car, can't he?
Yeah. But if they've never made a good movie of a Hemingway story because they were able to bring this portly man with a beard into the story too. And I thought the way to make a Hemingway movie would be to have a little inset, you know. It's just a little cameo of Hemingway up in the corner the whole time to remind you who wrote this.
The general way these things are handled by Hollywood, I don't think anybody in charge out there would admit to this, but this is exactly what they do. They'll buy the book from the author more times than not and engage him to write the screenplay. They will then pay him for writing the screenplay and junk it and put somebody else or some of their people on it that won't get them any trouble.
That's right.
You know, that's almost invariably what they did. I had a good lawyer, and they tried to do the exact same thing to me, and they were not able to do it. So if Deliverance is not a great film, and I sometimes think that in some ways it is a great film, I can't say that Hollywood traduced me or betrayed me in any way. If it's not a great film or an outstandingly good film, it's not Bert's fault, it's not John Voight's fault, it's not John Borman's fault, it's not Vilma Ziegman's fault, the cinematographer. It's my fault. I can't say that I was done in and won't.
Okay. I think we're coming to the end now. I want to thank Sam Lawrence on the end, James Dickey on my right, Kurt Vonnegut Jr., and y'all workshop South Carolina. Okay?